It usually starts subtle. A quiet shift in tone, a glance that lingers just a bit too long, a so-called joke that feels more like a dig. The energy in the room changes just slightly, just enough. And most people, they ignore it. They tell themselves it's not a big deal, that it's not worth the trouble. So they brush it off, they move on, until it happens again. This time, it's louder, more public, sharper, and by the time they feel something sting and decide to speak up, it's already too late. Because here's the truth. Disrespect ignored is disrespect accepted, and Machiavelli. He understood this better than most. In a world that revolves round power, reputation, and control, he saw respect not as something you passively earn, but something you actively enforce. The moment someone disrespects you, what you do next says everything. Not just to them but to everyone watching. Because disrespect is rarely personal at first. It's a test. And if you fail it, if you let it slide, you're not just seen as weak, you're seen as easy to cross again. So what do you do when someone crosses the line? You don't react later. You don't think about it on the drive home. You respond right then, but not emotionally. You don't explode. You don't lecture. You go quiet, still, focused. Because silence is not weakness, when used correctly. It's the beginning of dominance. This is the first Machiavellian rule when dealing with disrespect. Never let emotions make your decisions. The one who reacts emotionally loses control, but the one who withdraws deliberately calmly becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability, that breeds caution. Your silence isn't passive. It's not ignoring the moment. It's withdrawing your energy completely. No chuckle, no polite nod, no explaining how it made you feel. Just stillness. Let them sit in the void of your reaction. Let them feel the energy collapse like a vacuum. Because here's what disrespect feeds on. Reactions, laughter, defensiveness, pleasing. It needs attention to grow. But when met with quiet, unshaken stillness, it becomes what it really is: pathetic. Machiavelli never struck first. He observed. He waited. He let his opponents reveal themselves fully, confidently. And when he did move, it wasn't out of rage. It was surgical. That's your next move. When someone throws shade or delivers a disguised insult, don't meet it with emotion. Don't clap back. Don't play their game. Mirror it. Hold it up to them coldly, cleanly, with a question. It might sound like this. Did you mean it that way? Would you care to say that again? That sounded intentional. Want to explain it? These aren't insults. These are scalpels. You're not attacking. You're dissecting. Because here's what most people who throw disrespect don't expect: exposure. They're used to people laughing it off, awkwardly smiling, or letting it pass. But when you force them to own their words in front of others, when you calmly ask them to repeat what they just said, it changes everything. Most won't double down. Because most people who test boundaries don't do it out of bravery. They do it out of habit, out of opportunism. And when they get met with cold clarity instead of emotional reaction, doubt begins to creep in. Doubt. That's the goal, not revenge. Not a dramatic confrontation. Doubt. The person who plants doubt in others, who causes hesitation, who makes people second-guess how to speak around them. That person doesn't need to ask for respect. They generate it without saying a word. But there's a catch. Anyone can hold frame once. Most people can confront someone once. But the real power, it's in what comes next: consistency. If your energy softens again later, if you go back to normal, if you smile and pretend like nothing happened, they'll test you again. just in a different way. So here's step 3. Redefine the relationship immediately. After someone disrespects you, and you've responded with silence and exposure, don't reset to baseline. Don't go back to small talk. Don't accept invitations. Reframe the dynamic. You change how you interact. You sharpen your tone. You pull your presence back. You make them feel that shift no announcement needed. If the disrespect was public, let your change in demeanor be public too. No comebacks, no big speeches, just posture. Machiavelli believed that a well-timed, justified public response does more than neutralize the threat. It teaches everyone else in the room. And in the world of power dynamics, education is leverage. When people see that one slight changes the way you operate, they start recalibrating. They speak differently. They tread more carefully. Because suddenly, your name comes with weight. And here's the thing. The people who can't be disrespected, they're not the ones who scream the loudest. They're the ones who know what to do, instantly and quietly. When the line is crossed, and they never explain themselves, because respect doesn't come from comfort, it comes from clarity. So from now on, you don't let things slide. You don't explain away disrespect. You don't hope they didn't mean it that way. You make sure they know they crossed a line, and you do it without ego, without noise, just with presence, precision, and the absolute refusal to let your self-worth be debated. That's how you kill it, before it even starts, not with a shout, but with a pause, a gaze, a silence that makes them rethink everything. Because the truth is this: disrespect doesn't begin as boldness. It begins as calculation. They're testing you to see how far they can go. And every time you ignore it, every time you make it easy, they learn a dangerous lesson that you're safe to dismiss. And once they learn that, reclaiming control takes twice the effort. So after that first moment after the silence, the eye contact, the surgical question, what happens next, is crucial. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. They're going to try again. Maybe not directly, maybe not with the same tone, but they will test you again. This time it'll be subtler, a little joke, but with a smile, an accidental exclusion from a group decision, a passive-aggressive comment dropped casually into conversation, just to see. Will you flinch? That's when you make your next move, this one. It separates the respected from the forgettable. You respond with what Machiavelli would call disproportionate consequence. That doesn't mean you blow up. It doesn't mean you start a fight. It means you respond in a way that's stronger than they expected. Not louder, colder. Why? Because fair punishments are forgettable, but consequences that linger, those leave a mark. You're not reacting emotionally. You're sending a message. You don't get to test me twice. So, if the disrespect happened publicly, the response comes publicly but still with control. No insults, no outbursts, just deliberate, clean rejection. They make a comment, you pause. Look directly at them, then shift your response to someone else entirely. Cutting them out of the loop, they ask a question. You give a one-word answer. Then turn your energy elsewhere. They try to joke with you, warm things up again. You stay polite, but formal, distant, closed off. The social equivalent of a locked door. And that's what stings the most, not being insulted, but being removed, ignored by someone who used to acknowledge them. That subtle freeze-out makes people think harder than any lecture ever could. Now, this is where most people fail. Because they want to be liked. They want to be the bigger person. They want to move on. But Machiavelli would laugh at that. Respect isn't earned through forgiveness. It's earned through clarity and reinforced through boundaries that come with consequence. Here's where your leverage really begins to show. People are always watching. They saw the moment of disrespect. They saw how you handled it. And now, they're watching to see if you meant it. This is your chance. This is the moment to recast your image, not with trauma, not with words, but with posture. Because, as Machiavelli understood, image is more powerful than truth, and your image, after conflict, becomes your armor or your exposure. You want people to see your silence and think, he doesn't tolerate that, or she won't engage if you cross her, or simply, you only get one shot with them. That kind of reputation shifts your position in every room you enter. People stop being casual. They speak more carefully. They don't joke the same way. They use words like sharp, no nonsense, or intense when they talk about you. You didn't ask for that respect. You built it through consistency, not noise. But here's the deeper truth. Not everyone will back down. Some people don't care if they're publicly shamed. Some thrive on conflict. They enjoy destabilizing others. They want to provoke you just to see if they can. These people aren't testing you anymore. They're trying to escalate. And when they escalate, you don't match their fire. You don't meet their chaos with chaos. You escalate in a different way. You escalate socially. Instead of insulting them, you use their own behavior against them. Calmly, cleanly. In front of others. Let's say they make another cutting remark. You don't snap back. You simply ask, do you say that kind of thing at work too? Or, if you talk to your friends like that, I'd hate to hear how you talk to people you don't like. Now you're not defending yourself. You're holding up a mirror. You're making them own their behavior in public, and that makes people shrink. Not because you attack them, but because you turned the spotlight on them and let their own words hang there, awkward and exposed. That's the Machiavellian version of retaliation. It's never rushed, never loud. It's precise, so clean that they don't even realize how badly they've lost until the moment has already passed. You stay calm. You stay poised. You don't explain. You just let the room take in what happened. And now, the disrespect, it belongs to them. You've shifted the dynamic completely. You've taken the insult and turned it into proof of who they are and who you are. And here's the real reward. Once you've done this, you don't need to chase respect. You've built a presence that handles that for you. From now on, your job isn't to be liked. It's to be unreadable. Because what people fear most isn't your anger. It's your unpredictability. Did they go too far? Why are you so quiet now? What are you thinking? That uncertainty becomes your shield. Because the person they're unsure of is the one they start avoiding. Not because they're scared, but because they can't predict you. And Machiavelli warned about this. A ruler who's easy to read is easy to control. But when you become calm, controlled, and unreadable, you stop being a person they test. You become a variable they avoid. You don't speak unless there's value. You don't react unless it's calculated, and when you do respond it lands. That's where real presence comes from. Not from dominating every conversation, but from being the one whose words echo after they've left the room. And people notice your silence. It gains weight. People lower their voices when you enter. They shift in their seats. They change their tone. That's not fear, it's respect. Because presence is built through contradiction, you don't always respond, but when you do, it stings. You don't dominate, but you never let a line get crossed. You don't ask for respect, but the moment it's violated, you disappear. And that silence, it's louder than any confrontation. Now we reach the final transformation, the one few people master. You stop reacting to disrespect like it's personal. You start treating it like information. This is the deepest shift. Most people hear an insult and they feel pain. They take it personally. But you hear the insult and think, there it is, their weakness. Disrespect becomes a signal. A readout. You don't flinch. You don't react. You read it. What's behind it? Insecurity. Jealousy. A need to feel powerful because they feel powerless somewhere else. And once you see it that way, you are no longer in the emotional game. You've moved to strategy. Every act of disrespect becomes a data point. Not something to get offended by, but something to log and act on with precision. You don't forgive. You don't forget. You calculate. Do they still deserve access to you? Should they be shut out quietly or made an example of? Should you let them drift into irrelevance or use their misstep to reinforce your presence to everyone else? You're not reacting anymore. You're positioning. You're controlling deception. And this is what Machiavelli mastered. The best position to be in is one where people respect your boundaries even when you are not there to enforce them. When your presence is so defined, so clearly structured, that your absence is just as powerful. Because true power isn't about being feared or praised, it is about becoming someone people don't want to test at all. And here is the Machiavellian insight that makes it real. The people who are rarely disrespected are not always the loudest or most intimidating. They're the ones who have made disrespect expensive, not through anger, not through drama, but through a consistent, surgical refusal to tolerate even 1% of it, and that comes from control. Control over your reactions, control over your energy, control over who even gets to interact with you. When you operate this way, something shifts. People hesitate before speaking. Their tone changes, their words soften. Why? Because they now realize you're not here to be liked. You're here to be respected, and if someone can't give you that, you don't argue, you vanish silently, completely, without warning or explanation. That's the moment when a room recalibrates around you. When people don't just stop disrespecting you, they stop even thinking they could. Because now, you're no longer the person they joke about, interrupt, or cross casually. You've become someone whose boundaries are self-regulated, whose standards are enforced without noise, who doesn't need to say a word to let others know where the line is. And that's when you become something more than respected. You become untouchable. Here's the final layer, the move that defines legacy. What happens when someone who disrespected you finally realizes they made a mistake? They come back. They apologize. They try to laugh it off. They try to rebuild the connection. This is your defining moment. Because now you're not reacting to an attack. You're shaping the narrative. You're deciding who they become and who you become. You don't punish. You don't forgive. You do something far more powerful. You stay the same. No bitterness. No fake smile. No attempt to comfort or smooth it over. You simply remain and change your gaze. Doesn't search for them. Your tone doesn't adjust for them. Your presence no longer includes them. They're not an enemy. They're not a threat. They're just irrelevant. And that's what hurts the most. Not rejection, not insult, but realizing they were never that important to you in the first place, that you weren't seeking approval, that you didn't need them to belong, that you weren't playing by their rules. This is power by absence, power through detachment. Because when they realized their disrespect didn't hurt you, it elevated you. That's the cut they never recover from. You're sharper, more focused, more respected, and most importantly, more distant. That's the role Machiavelli would assign you, not the vengeful prince who punishes every insult, but the calm, calculating architect who lets people ruin themselves, who lets others overextend, expose themselves, and collapse under the weight of their own choices while you remain just out of reach. And now, something odd starts to happen. People talk about you differently, not in loud, gossipy ways, but in whispers. He doesn't say much, but when he does, you don't want to be on her bad side. They don't come back round once you cross them. That's what you've built, a reputation so quiet, so disciplined, that people self-correct round you. They watch their tone, they measure their words. Not because they're scared, but because you've added weight to your energy. And from here on out, you don't fight for respect anymore, because you've shown something rarer than dominance. You've mastered selective presence. You're there when you choose to be. You speak when you have something that matters to say. And when you leave, whether it's a conversation, a relationship, or a room, people feel it. Because the person who can't be disrespected isn't the loudest. It's the one whose attention is no longer guaranteed. So let them wonder. Let them guess. Let them talk. Because deep down, they know. If they cross the line, you won't argue. You won't explain. You won't chase. You'll disappear. And that silence, that will echo louder than any comeback ever could, forever.